Hi, I'm Nicola Mann from Parentline Plus and welcome to Goss Teenager TV. I'm here with Susie Heyman, parenting expert. Welcome, Susie.
Thank you, Nick. Good to be here. Yes, I'm Susie Heyman. I'm a trustee of Parentline Plus and an agony aunt. Now, I think we're talking about teenagers and sex at the moment, aren't we?
We are. So parents are coming to Goss Teenager, posting on our message boards and thinking their teenager is having sex. As a parent, how do you start that tricky conversation about safe sex, contraception? What advice would you give?
Yes, you know the joke about the person who stops the yokel and says, how do I go from here to there? And the answer is, well, you shouldn't start from here. The earlier you start talking about sex with teenagers, actually the earlier you start to talk about with young children, the better. And usually you don't have to give them a speech, you just have to answer the questions that come up. But of course, if you haven't been talking to them, they're going to be turned off coming to you with questions, and that may be the danger. You suddenly find yourself in this position where you can't ignore it any longer. Something's going on, and you need to talk about it. And I think one good way to start would be to have a look on Got a Teenager. We've got some really good information. We've got some, all sorts of resources here that will perhaps make having that conversation a bit easier. Because it's about picking up on hints, on opportunities, something on a soap, something in the papers, something in a film that you've seen that you can start the conversation on the lines of, what do you think? What if? So you're not actually saying to someone, I think you should be doing this. You're opening into a general conversation, and then it will get round to what you think and what they think. And I think it's quite important to start listening to what they think as well as telling them what you think.
And what about if they react with just, I don't want you to talk to me about this, what do you do in that instance?
They might go on talking. The less it's about them, the less it's about lecturing, the more likely it is that you're going to have a conversation rather than, as I said, a speech. It's not sitting down to have the sex talk. It's about, I read this, I saw this, I heard this, this is what I think, what do you think about it? And I think with teenagers you have to accept that what they think may be different from you. I mean, I have to be reassuring to parents that youngsters usually come around to roughly our way of thinking eventually, but while they're teenagers they may want to take up a position that is very different from us. But sometimes it's not that different. I mean, the number of parents who will start off with the lecture of, you shouldn't be doing this, and then teenager might ask the awkward question, well, when did you first have sex? Oops, actually yes it was before I was 18 or before I was married. So you shouldn't be lecturing if your actual thinking is if what you've actually done is slightly different. But again, that's a discussion about, well, I did do it that way and perhaps I was a bit sorry, so that's why I want to handle my experience. So it's about having that conversation, that's simple.
And is the conversation any different when you're talking to your son or when you're talking to your daughter?
Well, it shouldn't be. And I think that's actually quite important. Sadly, often our ideas are that if it's a daughter, oh my God, because they may be getting pregnant and bringing trouble back to my door, or somehow if it's a son, well, it doesn't matter. But that's somebody else's daughter who is actually, could be your daughter as well. And I think what we're mostly talking about with young people is broken hearts. I mean, I know pregnancy seems to be the important thing. Don't forget, by the way, a teenager can be liable for that pregnancy, so it costs a lot. So it's not as if they actually get off scot-free. But, and also the emotional thing, that's their child if we're talking about pregnancy, so it's actually just as important to them as it is to the girl. But I think the important thing is we're talking about emotions, and therefore we should really be talking to both our sons and our daughters in exactly the same way, and with equal importance. But it is about, having that chat about, it's what would I do, what would you do, what do you think about this, what is your opinion, how would you act? And it's not just one talk, it's a conversation that should be going on, and you'll find lots of opportunities to have that conversation because, let's face it, the world seems to be full of sex. We can always say, what do you think about that? Because there's something to say that about virtually every day.
So when you're having that chat, is that chat purely about what are the options out there for contraception, or is it about bringing it back to relationships and heartbreak?
I think it should be both, because I think it's about responsibility. It's about being able to say to young people, what would you do if, and what would the consequences be if? And I think sometimes we have to think very carefully about whether, if we're saying, I think you should be using contraception, do we believe that that's going to make them go out and have sex? And that's one of, I think, the big lies that we have, the big myths in this society, that if you talk about sex, they're going to then go off and do it. If you talk about contraception, they're then going to then go off and do it. No, they're going to have sex if they feel strongly for a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It's not actually about knowing about it. And in a sense, it's quite the opposite. Look at the countries where they've had good sex education, they know about contraception, they have access to contraception, they start having sex a year later than ours do. So actually it's more protective than it is in any way encouraging to talk about those issues. And I think it's something that we really need to do.